At any given moment throughout City 17, a civil protection raid could tear families apart, resistance strongholds could be assaulted by Overwatch soldiers, and even a single city scanner could photograph and spot an anti-citizen wanted by the Combine. While all of this could have happened within seconds, it was only possible because of a complex system built by our benefactors, and every unique unit within it followed the same commanding voice. The Overwatch system on Earth was yet another way the Combine manipulated and controlled humanity, forcing them into a state where they effectively governed themselves under Combine law. But how extensive was this system? What pulled the strings and acted as the backbone of the Combine's military forces on Earth? And how did it change over the years? In this video, we explore the lore, story, and structure of the Overwatch in Half-Life. Across the bleak, cobbled streets of City 17, residents heard the monotone echoes of an artificial woman's voice. This was the voice chosen by the Combine for the Overwatch AI. Each time she spoke, one of countless Overwatch units under her command sprang into action to complete its objective. To those who had not chosen to join the Combine's ranks, these echoes stirred fear, paranoia, and the creeping thought that maybe they had done something wrong. What if this voice was issued because of something they had done, and they would never be seen again?
You are charged with Anti-Civil Activity Level 1, Protection Unit, Prosecution Code. Duty, Sword, Operate.
The Overwatch AI was the backbone of the Combine's military force on Earth. As a part of their manipulation and control over the human population they had enslaved, almost everything outside of Sector 17 remains unknown. Still, it is likely that this AI commanded all Combine units on Earth. The Citadel of City 17 was established as the primary headquarters for all Combine forces on the planet. Connected to every other Citadel on the planet, it, like the others, constructed new synths and housed Combine forces. But this Citadel was different. Not only did it serve as the home of Earth's administrator, Dr. Wallace Breen, but it also housed the Overwatch AI itself. And she was connected to everything. From every civil protection unit that performed mundane tasks, to every city scanner that surveyed the skies, to the suppressors of the Overwatch Commando branch, and even the deadly Overwatch Elite. Every order came from this AI, who drew on the remarkable amount of information available to her, relaying commands that always aligned with the programming set by her creators, likely the Combine advisors. Each unit was expendable as long as the objective was complete. In the heart of Sector 17 in City 17, in what was once a bank or museum next to the Citadel, the Overwatch Nexus became the stronghold for all Overwatch units in the region. The AI itself was just a system that issued orders whenever it received information. But where did she get this information, and how different were the units, synths, and pieces of technology in her arsenal? Well, each one was unique and almost designed for their specific role. It began just after the Combine's invasion, as humanity's darkest period arrived. The population that had survived was desperate. They had been ripped from their families, moved across the globe into settlements, and every action was monitored. This was not the Combine's first invasion, and it would not be their last. They were always one step ahead. In a time of paranoia, desperation, and ruin, the Combine offered those who were willing an opportunity. If they became a member of the Civil Protection, a human police force that followed Combine law, they could have better housing, additional rations, a sense of safety, and a little bit of power. At the base of the Overwatch hierarchy, civil protection units were enlisted to enforce order and compliance, and to spread fear and paranoia amongst those who still held hope of freedom from the Combine regime or thoughts of resistance. This role was essentially a gateway into participation with the Combine, while those higher up in the hierarchy went through the various procedures of forced evolution. Civil protection, or what the human population called metrocops, retained their memories, personality, and humanity, both physically and psychologically. This was just a stepping stone to something greater. The aim was to lay the foundation for a submissive society by turning humanity against itself. And it worked. Within the settlements, metrocops were given gas masks to hide their faces. These masks also protected them from dangerous aerosol attacks by resistance units, and gave them not only a view of the world in front of them, but a direct link to the cameras of the city scanners, shield scanners, and deadly manhacks. A vocoder disguised their voices, and uniforms protected them from enemy fire. These uniforms ensured they could perform their tasks, but also hid who was under the mask from civilians. Anyone could be a part of the civil protection, and to stay safe, it was better to avoid any comments about resistance. On top of this, the Combine rewarded those who told on their neighbors with additional rations. To submit was to have an easier life. As for their job, civil protection units walked the streets, guarded important locations, conducted raids on those suspected of resistance activity, and interrogated them for information. The bleeps of their radio signaled they had received an order, and the scared population nearby had to stay on their best behavior. Even then, those who became metrocops for power, those who enjoyed this role, were able to abuse the population without restraint. To complete the objectives set by the Overwatch AI, metrocops used a stun baton and a USP match pistol. If an instant was deemed more dangerous, they pulled out an MP7, a manhack to survey the area and eviscerate targets, a flare gun, or mounted weaponry. Throughout all of this, they reported their findings and updated the voice so she could reevaluate the situation with new information, update their orders, or, if necessary, bring in units that were more equipped for the job. The AI had eyes and ears everywhere. From surveillance cameras to city scanners to anonymous tips, all of this factored into the next mission objective. The amount of information the AI received would have been immense. With a heartbeat monitor on each unit, the AI also knew when one of her pawns was down, and as they regularly updated her with information about their location, it was not hard to pin down enemies of the Empire. As stated, civil protection was just the entry point into collaboration with the Combine. What happened if someone wanted to advance and have a greater impact? The Overwatch AI was the backbone of the Combine's military forces on Earth, and the civil protection was the lowest level of its military hierarchy. But for the units who wanted to evolve, they were offered the opportunity to become an Overwatch Soldier, or as the AI addressed them, stabilization delegates. To advance to this level, these units and eager humans who truly believed in the Combine's cause were put through an extensive, barbaric procedure at one of the Combine's designated strongholds across the planet. In Sector 17, this was the former human prison of Nova Prospect. In this horrendous operation, in what can only be described as forced evolution, drastic changes were made to the human. Their masks were sealed to their faces, and their eyes removed in favor of a permanent synthetic interface built into the mask itself. Their throat and chest were adapted to hold air for longer. Their pain was either reduced or removed completely through a neural chip in their brain. When exhaustion or injury came, stimulants kept them going. This was only a fraction of the physical transformation. And yet, they also endured a horrid psychological change. Through mental conditioning and advanced technology, these units were trained to obey the Overwatch AIs and their squad leaders' commands without question. Their emotions were reduced and memories altered. In their place, Overwatch codes, combat tactics, and squad formations were uploaded. This made them incredibly effective with an MP7, a pulse rifle, and grenades. Anyone who moved into a specialization was trained to either be a shotgun soldier or a sniper. Both were useful classes in the heat of volatile battle. Even now, there were probably more, but the Resistance only saw these two specializations. Having gone through this change, these Overwatch soldiers were deadly, but although they had lost some of their humanity during the process, they were not invulnerable. To protect them, bulletproof vests and armor were equipped to keep them running, because that is all they were, cogs in a war machine. Each one was no different than another, all who blindly followed the voice of the Overwatch command center in their ear. The Overwatch soldiers were not seen frequently throughout the settlements unless they were called in. Instead, they were given more of an active role in active areas, whether it was to monitor the Resistance activity, to shoot down Xenian threats that attempted to expand their territory, or, most importantly, to raid Resistance bases. They often did so alongside the might of the Overwatch and Airwatch's synthetic units. Dropships moved them across vast distances, and gunships fired from the skies. They were used when brute force was required, and they were the perfect tool to get a job done. For those who wanted to elevate even higher in the Combine's graces, there was another promotion available, but this removed what little remained of their humanity completely. The Overwatch Elite, at least 2 decades after the Combine's invasion, were regarded, at least in Sector 17, as the Combine's strongest, smartest, and fastest human-based unit. The AI, however, only brought these out when absolutely necessary, as they were rarely seen by the civilians within the cities. Recognizable by their single red lens, white bulletproof armor, and incredible accuracy, these units had a human form, but what was hidden beneath had long ago abandoned their original self. Alongside the procedure they had endured to become an Overwatch soldier, their emotions and need for self-preservation were removed entirely, and their ears were replaced with a synthetic connection to the audio domes in their mask, leaving only blind commitment. Without the need to think about themselves, their focus was always on the mission. They did not think about the fact they could die because that thought was removed, and with this sole focus on the completion of what the Overwatch AI told them, they became the perfect squad leaders for Overwatch soldiers. To complete their tasks, they were trained to use Overwatch-issued pulse rifles, an amazing weapon design, a deadly fusion of both human and Combine technology. Not only did these fire devastating pellets of energy, but with one press of a button, they launched a sphere of concentrated dark matter at speed that destroyed anything biological in its path. The Overwatch Elite were used only when necessary. If Overwatch soldiers required additional help, the Elite were sent in to guide them. If an uprising began, they were deployed to shut it down quickly. And if a stronghold such as Nova Prospect or the Citadel was under siege, the Overwatch Elite were brought in to protect their masters. The Overwatch AI controlled everything, and while the transhuman forces under her command were useful, she had other tools in her arsenal as well. The Overwatch was not just humans. It was a collection of technology and synthetic creatures that had suffered a similar fate to humanity on their own worlds. She sent orders to countless units on countless missions across the globe simultaneously. But what were these other pieces on her chessboard? Alongside the repurposed human tech that became armored personnel carriers, razor trains, and hunter choppers, the AI made use of the cameras in city scanners and manhacks to detect and track down anti-citizens, to eliminate the path an escapee might have taken through the streets or canals, and ordered nearby units to bring them in. The Metro Cops, in the case of a potential Resistance member, would report their location and updates on the situation, so the AI could offer additional information to help them. More information meant she could come up with a more intelligent and successful solution. The tech, however, was just one side of this. Striders, dropships, and gunships were essential in the event a stronger resistance group formed, and for those who hid in the shadows, away from all eyes, the Hunter was the perfect unit to track them down. Each unit was simply a tool for a job, just a cog in the machine. Throughout their exploration across worlds, the Combine Empire had perfected the art of forced evolution. The gunships may have been an aquatic creature on their homeworld, transformed into a flying turret. The Vortigaunt were beings connected to a great source of power, but they were transformed into living batteries. And the Stalkers were once rebellious humans, turned into mindless drones who operated Combine technology. These creations were the endpoint of testing and experimenting to get the perfect product. 5 years before the arrival of Gordon Freeman, Alex Vance embarked on an adventure to save her father. However, during her time in the public region and quarantine zone of City 17, she did not encounter any Overwatch Soldiers or Overwatch Elite. This suggests that the Combine units she did encounter during this period were eventually phased out in favor of them, or they were simply not deployed in this region. What Alex did encounter was the Overwatch Commando branch, which had 4 distinct units, each bringing something different to the team. At the base were the Combine Grunts. These were merely a step up from Metro Cops. They also went through surgery similar to what the Overwatch Soldiers experienced. Their emotions were reduced and their faces, throats, and chests adapted. These, however, also carried an oxygen tank on their backs, which suggested they were either unable to breathe on their own or relied on them when in hazardous environments. In groups of 2 or 3, they were tasked to watch over areas and protect them from Xenian and Resistance foes with a Pulse SMG, as a step up from the civil protection, and to their worry and disgust, Combine Grunts were sent into the horrific, Xenian-infested quarantine zone, something many of them were not happy with, but complied with regardless. This region was dark and full of terrors from another dimension. The Combine Grunts were fairly limited in their ability, so when stronger Xenian foes, resistance units, or even scavengers took out her units, the AI deployed more capable forces. Wallhammers, also called Combine Chargers, were huge. These brutes were deadly with a heavy shotgun. If an anti-citizen were able to fire past their shield, their thick plated armor was more than capable enough of protecting them. These units functioned in a similar manner to the Overwatch Shotgun Soldiers, which suggests the procedure may have been simplified in the future. Overwatch Soldiers may simply have been experts with a shotgun instead of undergoing this whole transformation. The Combine Suppressor was another heavy unit discovered by Alex Vance during this period, and they were even more deadly than the Suppressors. These also wore heavy plated armor, and with a pulse minigun, decimated anything in front of them. It was only in a brief window when they were reloading that their targets would have any opportunity to strike back. If the promotion blueprint of MetroCop to Overwatch Soldier to Overwatch Elite applies here, it is likely this went MetroCop to Combine Grunt to either Combine Charger or Combine Suppressor. Both came with horrendous surgeries and procedures to improve them. As for their leaders, the equivalent to the Overwatch Elite was the Combine Ordinal. When she detected a much stronger presence was required, the Overwatch AI deployed these leaders of the Overwatch Commando branch to guide their grunts, chargers, and suppressors. These had no emotions and acted in a very similar way to the Overwatch Elite. Their life was to complete the mission given to them, and with an arsenal of a pulse rifle, an SMG, grenades, and manhacks, they were a deadly force, all while the units under their command completed their roles. Alex encountered many of these on her journey through the quarantine zone, but just 5 years later, Dr. Gordon Freeman on his journey through City 17, the Wasteland, Nova Prospect, the Citadel, and the Outlands did not encounter one. The Overwatch was a well-designed system that utilized every tool available to it, and during the return of Dr. Gordon Freeman, 2 decades after the Combine's invasion, it threw everything at him that it had, under the rules it had been set by the Combine. Despite every City Scanner, Strider, and Overwatch Soldier's best efforts, the free man and those who followed him began an uprising that led to the destabilization of the Citadel. It was in these moments of chaos that the AI began to fail. Her commands, codes, and voice glitched, unable to finish a sentence. And when the Citadel in City 17 ultimately fell, every Citadel across the planet went offline too. This was the end of the Overwatch AI, at least for now on Earth. As for what remained of the Overwatch units, their command came directly from the Combine advisors themselves. It is clear where the structure of hierarchy came from. Civil protection to Overwatch soldiers to Overwatch Elite. Each procedure made each human unit stronger and more resilient. But where did the AI itself come from? Maybe the Combine designed it themselves, or more likely, it was a piece of tech from another world they had corrupted for their own insidious use. On a final note, we know that the human Overwatch units were sent off-world to conquer new planets, so the idea opens up. Did the Overwatch AI command forces on every world? And what were the Overwatch units like that were not sent to Earth? We only saw a fraction of the Combine's forces. If only the Resistance could have accessed her databank, they could have understood so much more about life away from Earth. The Overwatch AI is such a prominent character that is often overlooked. I say character because its presence is felt so heavily throughout City 17, even though, for what we know, it was not sentient. If anything, she was the biggest antagonist of Half-Life 2. The units under her command were essentially spawnable characters in what was essentially a MOBA. This was such an interesting concept for how the majority of the Combine's forces on Earth were controlled and commanded, an efficient system. I had not thought too much about the AI itself until I truly explored how much power it had. If she became sentient and went rogue, the Combine could have had their own Aperture Science moment on a universal scale. What a game that would be. I also wanted to note that although Overwatch soldiers were found in the Half-Life Alyx game files, they did not make it into the game, which pushes the theory more for me that the Commando branch became the units we meet in the other games. They were phased out. As I have talked about Overwatch units a lot, I know there may be some comments about Entropy Zero. I loved playing through both of them, but I did want to stick to just canon, despite how well Entropy Zero fits into the series. I may explore those games separately in the future. That was everything I wanted to say. If you enjoyed this video, then I would love you to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you did not, and let me know what you thought in the comments section below. Finally, I would like to thank my gold tier patrons and channel members: Queen Arby, Lewis, Orin X, Drakey Phoenix, Dano Cal Drawings, 501st Clone Boy, Ruben Mendoza, Imperial Embers, Canifex, Jimsy, Average Sol, Azu, Jonas, Yali Rodriguez, Detroit, Motzi, Brina Lee, and Jacqueline Lovell. What did you think of this topic? What did you think of the Overwatch and every unit within it? And what would you like me to cover next? Let me know in the comments below. This is where our story ends. Thanks to the Combine for the opportunity to prove my usefulness, and check back soon for a new one. Help.